Welcome, one and all, to the Hammer Territory podcast. And hey, you know what? We did it just a few weeks ago when we signed Jurickson and Profar, and on the eve of pitchers and catchers, and let's be honest, a whole bunch of other Braves reporting officially on Wednesday, February the 12th, we figured we'd get the band back together. Scott Coleman, Stephen Tolbert, and myself. Only missing Brad Rowland. We will have that four-man pod here in the near future. But we are here once again to talk about, to me, what probably is going to be the source of many storylines when it comes to this spring training, the Braves pitching heading into the 2025 season. But before we get started, Scott Coleman, good as always to see you again. I think this may be the first time we've done two straight pods together, but pleasure to see you as always, sir.
Hey, fellas, I hope you and everybody out there are doing well. We are officially beyond the Super Bowl, which means, in my mind at least, it's two seasons. It's baseball season, which everybody listening to the show is very excited for. And then I think most of our listeners are probably college basketball fans as well. I know all four of the co-hosts on Hammer Territory are. So a really exciting time of year coming up. Shawn, you just said the players are basically already reported down in Florida, and before you know it, we'll have full team workouts and games and all kinds of things to talk about.
And Stephen, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. I know the last time that we talked, a fun part of the discussion was your investment when it comes to spring training hats. And I believe that you are displaying one of those investments right now. So, but beyond the hats, Stephen, I know you always are very interested in the storylines, many of them to talk about. And I know we're going to go dive in deep into a couple of storylines that you're going to be watching closely as things get started.
Yeah, what's up, guys? It's always good to be on with you. Only guy in the group right now who doesn't have the same three initials as we learned this week. Scott and Shawn not only have the same last name, they have the same initials all the way through, which is hysterical. But yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. This is a big topic of conversation right now. If you're online, which we probably, all three of us are probably online too much at this point, but it's a very, this conversation, do they have enough pitching? What about the bullpen? They haven't done anything on the pitching side this offseason, aside from an army of minor league signings, which we'll get to in a second. But yeah, this is a big deal. And this is a conversation that we probably needed to have for a couple of weeks now. We were kind of waiting to see if they would make a move, to alleviate some of this, but we just haven't had one yet. So it's time to have this conversation. It's good to do a three-man show to get kind of a roundtable discussion about it. But yeah, this is a big topic in Braves country right now.
So let's dive right into it. And Scott, let's kind of set the table here. Last year, you look at many of the different metrics that are out there when it comes to the Braves pitching staff, especially the starting staff, top three in many of the metrics, top five overall when it comes to pitching. And you look at it and you're like, we did this without Spencer Strider, Chris Sale, an unbelievable season as a Cy Young Award winner, Raisel Iglesias, maybe the most underrated relief arm in the game last year. But then you look at what happened in the playoffs and the fact that Chris Sale had his injury, the fact that Max Fried struggled in the playoffs, and we get to the offseason. And then you start to realize, okay, we lose Max Fried, we lose Charlie Morton, we lose J.J. Minter, and Joe Jimenez probably is out for most of, if not all of the season. That is a lot of value that is not here now. That was there last year. And the Braves really have not added anyone notable to this staff. I think, to me, that's one of the bigger storylines that's probably not talked about enough. How much value the Braves have lost without adding really anything notable.
Yeah, I think we should say here at the very beginning of the show that it is entirely possible that at any moment we get notified that the Braves have added a starting pitcher or reliever. And I think all three of us are very much pounding the table because we're in favor of that move. And I also think it's fair to say that you don't always know what you have until it's gone. I don't know if it's really sunk in yet because we were tweeting about this earlier and got, I think, both sides of the argument. I don't necessarily know if the fan base as a whole has grasped just how much this team has lost from last year. Max Fried was, whenever healthy, about as guaranteed of a start as you're going to get. Charlie Morton, we know who he was at age 40, reliable, took the ball every fifth day. Maybe it wasn't always 8 innings of 12 strikeout ball, but he gave the Braves a chance to win basically every night. AJ Minter has been a fixture in this bullpen for 7 seasons, and Joe Jimenez was as good as any setup man in the game last year. Those are 4 huge losses. And again, I think as it stands today, the Braves are okay, probably better than okay if everything goes right next season. But man, maybe we're jaded after last season, but I have a hard time sitting here in mid-February thinking nothing is going to go sideways for this team. That's a really risky game to play.
It's always an interesting question. Does X team have enough pitching? And the answer is almost always no, right? Like that's just the nature of the game.
Yeah.
No one has enough pitching. And no matter how much pitching you have, you don't have enough. So it's a nuanced thing. The Braves have a good pitching staff. Like objectively, if you look at projection systems, if you look at, the kind of strip out all the nonsense and just look at raw numbers, projections, setups, the Braves have a good pitching staff. I think that's completely fair to say. But it is not injury proof at all. At all. Like the Dodgers have like 9 starting pitchers. And the reason they have 9 starting pitchers is because almost certainly like 2 or 3 of those guys are going to get hurt because they have a pitching staff full of guys who've gotten hurt in the past. And so they built in some, they've built in some redundancies. They built in some backups. The Braves have not done that. And that's where I sit today in terms of I don't want to say frustration. Frustration is the wrong word, but my concern is that the Braves don't have those redundancies. If something happens to Rafael Iglesias, I don't know what they would do. I mean, I don't know what they would. I mean, they would be SOL. I don't know what they would do if something happened to Chris Sale or if Spencer Strider doesn't come back the way they think he's going to come back. They're in a lot of trouble. And again, we're not to the end of the offseason. There's still a lot of arms out there. Like Scott said, the Braves could make 2 signings tomorrow, and this entire podcast becomes irrelevant because they've addressed the needs. But as we sit here today, I think they still have holes on the team that they need to address. And I just don't. You can look up and down the list of names, and we'll talk about in a second. But Mark Bowman put out his first, or not his first, but his most recent roster projection right before spring training starts. If you look at the pitching side, there are names that you just can't believe are like the number 1 guys that are going to be on, especially in the bullpen. They just need more, and they need some injury protection because as bad as things went on the position player side last year, outside of the Strider injury, the Braves had a pretty good amount of pitching fortune last year. Chris Sale stayed healthy 98% of the time. Ronaldo Lopez conversion to the rotation went better than anybody could have imagined. Spencer Tolbert came out of nowhere. Rafael Iglesias had probably one of the best seasons of his career. Joe Jimenez had the best season of his career. Like they had a lot go right on that side of the ball last year. And the odds of that happening again, I don't feel great about it. I would love to see a little more redundancy. I'd love to see a couple more injury protections, both in the rotation and the bullpen. And there's still time to do it. But as we sit here today, do the Braves have enough pitching? No one has enough pitching. But specifically to start the season, I think the Braves need at least 2 more arms, either 1 in the rotation, 1 in the bullpen, or 2 in the bullpen, before I feel really comfortable about going into the season.
Kratz, do you like spending an hour on grocery shopping?
Nope. Speed up the process, please.
Introducing Hungry Root to the FT fam.
Now we can all be bougie with our own personal shopper to handle the food shopping, including Rex, based on what you're looking to put in your body.
I stack my Hungry Root box with items like gluten-free, dairy-free blueberry waffles for breakfast, shrimp veggie bowls for lunch, and a little filet mignon with potatoes and broccolini for dinner.
You can also say just, hey, Hungry Root, I eat paleo, or I'm vegetarian, and they load up your cart with personalized recommendations.
And those recs keep evolving as they learn about what you're into. Also, no BS, as in no artificial sweeteners or preservatives in any of Hungry Root's food. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as FT does. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/FT and use code FT. That's hungryroot.com/FT, code FT to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life.
And so let's first look at the starting rotation. And I know that many are going to want to talk about Spencer Strider. He probably, with Ronald Acuna Jr., when you talk about a singular player, is probably the one that people are going to be watching the most. But I first want to talk about the trio of Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach, and Ronaldo Lopez. Each and every one of them, to Stephen's point, were spectacular last season. But two of the same questions I think are fair to ask about each of those three pitchers. As we mentioned, Chris Sale, Ronaldo Lopez, and Spencer Schwellenbach arguably had the best or one of the best seasons of their career last year. All three of them did. So is regression a legitimate concern when it comes to Spencer Schwellenbach going through the league for the second time, in his career? Chris Sale, his age, could he potentially, regress? How hard is it going to be to repeat what he did at 36, 37 years old? Ronaldo Lopez, again, the league seeing him for a second time. Regression is the first question. The second question is, all three of them threw significantly more innings last year than they have either ever or quite in a while. So I think that there's multiple legitimate questions that, to Stephen's point, can be asked about each of those three starters. That's going to make it far from a guarantee we're going to see a repeat in 2025 of what they did in 2024.
I think when you talk about pitching staffs, it's not just the Braves who have significant, scary questions. And we should say that as well. The Phillies have the same risk. If Zach Wheeler pops his elbow in the first week of April, they're screwed, right? If whoever the best pitcher is going to be on the Mets this year, because their rotation is kind of weird, pops his elbow, they're in big trouble. But I think the Braves are unique for what you just laid out, Shawn. They have some real risk already built in. Chris Sale, healthy for the first time in like 5 years last season. Ronaldo Lopez had minor, albeit pretty scary, both elbow and shoulder concerns a year ago. Might have missed a week or two, but never missed a lot of time. And then Schwellenbach, who we talked about quite a bit on the last episode of the pod, was so good last season, but just like any pitcher in baseball can miss a couple weeks or miss months or miss the entire year. And then there's the Spencer Strider equation to all of this as he returns from elbow surgery. That's, by all accounts, Strider's having a great offseason, is on pace for a normal spring. But just those four alone, even if you want to say the Braves are going to be fine and get 25 starts from each of them on average, okay, fully healthy season, call it 30, 31. So let's say they get 100 starts out of those four guys combined. And that's far, far, far from a guarantee. But let's say things go well for the second year in a row with rotation health. You're still looking for 62 baseball games to be started by someone not in that group of four. And that's assuming everything goes right. So what happens if Chris Sale goes down or, God forbid, Strider's elbow isn't healthy? Then you're looking at 70, 80, 90 starts that you're having to cover. It just feels really, really risky to me to take on that when the Braves presumably have both money and prospect capital to try and swing a move here as basically spring training gets started.
Yeah, and money. Listen, money's a factor, but as it stands now, after the Profar signing, the Braves cash payroll sits around about 210, 212 million, something like that. That's still about 20 million away from where they were last year. Bowman reported they had 33 million to spend before the Profar signing, but again, they spent 12. So that would once again tell you they still have about 20 million to spend. Like the signs point to, they still have room to spend money. And like Scott just laid out, not only do you have injury concerns, Chris Sale, Ronaldo Lopez, but like Chris Sale threw 180 innings last year. He had thrown 150 innings the 3 years combined before that. Like Ronaldo Lopez was a reliever for 5 years before last year. I mean, he was throwing 67 innings a year. He just had a massive jump. Spencer Schwellenbach threw more innings last year than he's ever thrown in his life. Like these are not just pessimistic views of the pitching staff. These are real life, I think fully, I think these are full concerns. And when you have money to spend, when you have people on the free agent market that can help you, it just seems silly, right? I understand that Alex does not do deals unless he loves them. I get that. And he's always been like that, and he's always going to be like that. But, I don't know how much Andrew Haney would cost, but I can't imagine it's going to cost him more than $20 million a year. I mean, It's Andrew
No.
Heaney. I mean, that's a
Oh,
guy
yeah.
that's a guy that just makes sense for you. I know Nick Pavetta's got the qualifying offer tied to him, and he's got draft pick compensation tied to him, and that sucks. The qualifying offer is just a disastrous system. I can't believe it's ever been allowed in this sport, but I don't know what his price is, but like he could help you. Like you're trying to win a World Series. This is you're in the middle of your window. Scott and Brad just did this show about Ozzy Albies and how, hilariously, almost comically cheap his contract is. Like the reason you have those is so you can go do stuff like this. You can go get that extra piece that you need when you have a clear hole. And like Scott said, even if everything goes right, you still need a fifth starter. They like Grant Holmes. We need to say that out loud. They do like Grant Holmes. I like Grant Holmes. He had a really good year last year. Are you going to trust Grant Holmes for 30 starts next year? I don't feel great. I don't feel great doing that.
And can he physically do it too? Is
Yeah.
the legitimate question.
Yeah, that's a fair question. And it's the league is going to see him. They've seen it. They saw him last year. Is he going to take a step back? Is Swellenbach going to take a step back for the same reason? Braves fans more than anybody should know about these great prospects that come up. Soroka, Kyle Wright, Ian Anderson that come up, and either because of injury or whatever, they just drop off. Like it happens. I don't want to say it's going to happen with Spencer Swellenbach, but it happens. Swellenbach is not a guaranteed thing. He's done it 1 year. So they need if they just had one more dependable starter, I would feel so much better. Yeah. We'll get to the bullpen in a second, but just one more decent, even like fifth starter, somebody who could be a fourth, fifth starter, I would just feel so much better. Maybe it's just a weird looking at the names and feeling better about it, but I would just feel so much better with one more guy.
And the other, elephant in the room to me, kind of, I don't really know of a better analogy than kind of a Titanic analogy. The Braves sit here and they navigate, these icy waters very well. They've done it season after season with their pitching staff, 7 straight playoff appearances. But say you have your pitching go as well. You have so many things go right for your pitching this year, like you did last year. We talk about the managing through the regression. We talk about the managing through the injury risk. What about the pitchers being ready and being available in the postseason, right? Like, don't get me wrong. Again, the offense has been the reason why the Braves have struggled, for the most part in the last 3 postseasons. But each and every year, even in 2021, the availability of 3 or 4 of our starters has just not been there. I don't need to go through the names and the occurrences. Everybody knows it. But that's the big thing that stands out to me. The Braves even tried to go with a innings management approach last year to answer that very question, and it did not work out. So that's the other big thing that kind of, is something for us to figure out that we haven't for years, is how do we make sure that our best arms are ready to contribute and be effective in the postseason?
And I think, obviously we'll never get a straight answer from Alex, but I would love to know internally how they truly feel about some of these internal fifth starter types or fourth starter types to begin the season, or who knows how the season is going to go. But we talked about Grant Holmes. Ian Anderson is a fascinating player going into the year. I think it's worth saying, and while we all dearly love Ian for everything he did during the World Series run, that was the last time that Ian Anderson was an effective and healthy major league pitcher. That was fall of 2021, and it is now about to be the spring of 2025. I think you just kind of have to take Ian Anderson's upcoming season as, hey, if he gives you anything, it's awesome, and we'll be happy that he's come all the way back from the surgery. But you can't bank on Ian for that. I don't think. I don't know if you guys feel different. And similarly, a lot of these young guys, AJ Smith-Shawver, had injuries last year. I think we're all bullish on him long-term, but is AJ ready to make starts every 5th day in the major leagues in 2025? Similarly, a lost year for Hurston Waldrop. Can he come back? And again, no team other than the Dodgers, who have unlimited money and basically are playing in a different stratosphere, no team has 7 great starting pitchers just waiting around on opening day. But I think for these reasons we're outlining, and really the reason why we wanted to do this show, is just to really emphasize the many, many, many question marks on this team. And to me, it just doesn't feel like they need to have this many question marks. Like they have the ability to go and answer these questions. And again, maybe they will. Maybe we'll wake up tomorrow morning and there'll be 2 moves and we'll laugh. But I don't know, man. Steven, where are you at with all this?
Yeah, I mean, remember last year we were in the same spot. Like they had Max going into the year, at least they had Max, they had Strider, they had Lopez, and they had Sale, and they needed one guy to kind of step up and be that guy for the fifth starter job. And then Strider goes down, and that pushes everybody up one. But until Schwellenbach came in June, remember that fifth starter spot was a black hole
Oh, yeah.
because guys like AJ Smith-Shawver weren't ready. Hurston Waldrop wasn't ready. Bryce Elder is Bryce Elder. Like, we did this exact same thing last year, and that was when they had Max and Morton, and now they don't have Max or Morton. So now you're talking about Sale, Strider, Lopez, and Schwellenbach, and now you still need a fifth, and that's if everything goes right on the first four, which we've already laid out is no guarantee. If AJ Smith-Shawver or Hurston Waldrop or Ian Anderson had really strong years last year in AAA, I would feel different. I would be much more confident. And listen, I'm probably underestimating Grant Holmes. I will admit to that. They like Grant Holmes clearly much more than I do, and they trust him more than I probably would. I think that's fair to say. And if I'm wrong about that, I'll gladly own up to that. If he's actually as good as they think he is, then we're probably overreacting a little bit. But I just don't believe that yet. I'll need to see it one more time before I believe it. And I would just, Andrew Haney, I really thought, there's trade guys out there. I don't think the Dylan Cease thing is going to happen, but there's trade guys. I can't believe Jordan Montgomery is still a Diamondback. There's, all these scenarios we can go through, but just one more guy who's just a decent, solid, proven starter in the majors would make me feel a lot better.
And maybe this is our segue into the bullpen, but frankly, they might need Grant Holmes in the bullpen, depending on what they do. I mean, maybe now we'll talk a little more bullpen.
And he has no options, by the way. That's an important part of this.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I'll hit on, as we do go into the bullpen, Scott, to your point, is that, we've got a ton of questions about the starting rotation, but we also have a ton of proof that if they're healthy, the starting rotation is very good. They did it last year. They are very capable of being a top 5 unit in baseball. What we're used to seeing going into a season is Alex Anthopoulos putting emphasis on having a top 5 bullpen unit, both in terms of quality and in terms of depth going into a season. This year, though, going into 2025, it feels like a bit of a shift, and not one that I'm, confident in seeing, to be honest. Again, we mentioned AJ Minter has gone to the Mets. We mentioned that Joe Jimenez, due to the knee injury, likely out for a good portion of the season. Anything that you get from him would be a plus. But Mark Bowman of MLB.com came out and gave his projected bullpen for the Braves. And you look at it, you see some familiar names, but you just absolutely instantly look at it and you're like, okay, I see some familiar names. I know they've had some success, but man, that looks like a house of cards that's just one big wind away from falling flat on its face.
Yeah, so just to go through the names, in case people didn't see it. So Bowman put out his projections yesterday, I think, and he goes through the whole roster. And obviously, we're going to focus on the bullpen here. But the 8 names that he put out were Rossio Iglesias, Pierce Johnson, Dylan Lee, Aaron Bummer, Daysbel Hernandez, Angel Perdomo, Anderson Pilar, and Danny Jimenez are the 8 that he put out. Now, obviously, Bowman's educated guessing. Bowman's very plugged in, so I'd take his word over just about any's. But this is an educated guess. But the fact that, and this is what we said in the open, the fact that these are the 8 names as we sit here, right as pitchers and catchers report tomorrow, that's wild. I mean, that's not like Rossio Iglesias is very good. He's very good. He's going to be a good reliever in 2025. I'm almost certain. But, he had things in his profile last year that are probably not repeatable, that are going to regress a little bit. He's also getting up there in age. So, I don't think it's probably realistic to expect the Rossio Iglesias we got last year, but he's going to be very good. Pierce Johnson should be better. He fell off a little bit last year, at the end of last year, but he should be better. I'm fine with Pierce Johnson being one of their higher leverage relievers. I like Dylan Lee a lot. I like Aaron Bummer more than Brian Snitker does. But in terms of high leverage, like that's kind of where it ends. And I know people love Daysbel Hernandez. I think we've gotten a little. I tweeted this today. I think we've gotten a little ahead of our skis on Daysbel. The walks in the minor leagues scare me because usually when you walk as many people as he does in the minors, it comes to the majors much worse. So the walks scare me. He's also got minor league options. There's no harm in him starting in AAA if you get somebody better. And then you're at Angel Perdomo, Anderson Pilar, Dan Jimenez. Who knows? I mean, those guys all have potential, but who knows? None of those guys have ever done it on a big time, World Series contending team or even in the majors at all. That's just a ton of questions, and a lot has to go right for that to be a good group. Scott, I'm going to get your opinion on this, but man, I look at those names. I tweeted this out. I look at those names. You're like, Jesus, the Braves need another reliever. Like, I knew the Braves needed another reliever, but when Bowman put that list out, like, holy cow, do the Braves need another reliever?
It's pretty thin. And I mean, imagine if one of those guys gets hurt or just has an unlucky bad season. I mean, we've seen that. We know relievers. It's a tough business, a really tough business. So, sure, if you're telling me that I will call it the big four of Iglesias, Johnson, Lee, and Bummer is good. Yes. No qualms with that at all. That is a very solid top four in your bullpen. You mentioned Daysbel. The stuff is awesome. I do worry about the command, but I think at this point, why have Daysbel and Gwinnett any longer? Like, give him 3 months and see. And if he has a 9, he has a ERA that's high and he has a crazy walk rate, then you say it's just not happening. And if he's good, then okay, great. Now you have 5 reliable arms in your bullpen, but you need 8. Angel Perdomo, if that's not a familiar name, the Braves claimed Perdomo about a year and a half ago now. He has basically not pitched in 2 years because of elbow surgery. When he was healthy, he was terrific and has a ton of swing and miss from the left side. But again, total wild card. Who knows? If he's striking out a third of the batters he sees, amazing, great value. If he's not healthy or something pops up, you don't know. But hardly a proven commodity. Anderson Pilar, good numbers in the minor leagues. He was a Rule 5 pick from the Marlins. But again, he's like 26 years old, hasn't done it yet in the major leagues, and couldn't do it with the Marlins. Guys, this is not someone in the Dodgers system who just got buried under their $4 billion bullpen. He never pitched with Miami. And then Danny Jimenez, I'll be honest, I didn't look Danny Jimenez up. I don't know anything about Danny Jimenez. If he wants to throw 70 innings out of the bullpen and be awesome, then I will personally apologize to him and buy a jersey. But and then they've added other pieces too. They signed today, actually, they signed Jake Diekman, who's a veteran lefty, added Chad Kuhl, Dylan Covey, and a half dozen other non-roster invites who are going to get a chance. But the fact is that we sit here, again, mid-February, you feel really good about half of your bullpen, maybe 5 of them if you really, really like Daysbel Hernandez. And then after that, man, it could be, I think Shawn said it perfectly. This is a house of cards, and one card crumbles, and I think all of a sudden you're in trouble. And if that card happened to be Raisel Iglesias, that would be a really bad situation in a hurry.
2 things stand out to me looking at this bullpen that, kind of gives me a bit of confidence, but once again, puts a lot of pressure on history potentially repeating itself. In 2023, the Braves were historically good when it came to scoring runs early in games. Well, if this offense can do that once again, I think that the pressure is a bit off of this bullpen. But you're asking this offense to bounce back from what it struggled with more than anything, but besides runners in scoring position last year. The other thing that I'll say is this, is that if there is a trait of Alex Anthopoulos, I think I call him a master of the move on the margins. Well, the one area where he makes such good moves on the margins is the bullpen. I can't really think of, I know what he did for the outfield in 2021, but I don't think it's talked about enough what he did for the bullpen in 2019 when he got Shane Green, Mark Melancon, as well as Chris Martin, and basically overnight turned that bullpen from the worst in the league to the best. Alex Anthopoulos knows how to make midseason moves to strengthen a bullpen. But the thing is that that's typically because he's trying to recoup some value that he's lost to injury from what was a strong bullpen to begin with. This isn't a very strong bullpen to begin with. I know that I've seen a couple people talking about, well, if you're worried about the 5th, 6th, and 8th, there are this 5th, 6th, and 7th names in the bullpen right now, that's really a small thing to worry about. Well, it's not, because you're one injury away from those guys being potential 7th and 8th inning options. So to me, the bullpen feels like it's an area where, like last year when we were hoping Jared Kelenic could fill that outfield spot, and all of a sudden one day we wake up and we see Adam Duvall sign a 1-year, $3 million deal. It seems like that we're possibly going to see that type of move for the bullpen. I don't know exactly who it would be, but I would imagine that the bullpen is multiple moves away from being a finished product.
And I'll say this, if they add a starter and they move Grant Holmes to the bullpen looks better, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair. That's a name that we know and trust at least a little more than Danny Jimenez, who I had to look up before we showed, after Bowman put him on the list, I had to look him like he's been in Oakland the last 4 years, and he kind of sucked, to be honest. So like, that's
Great.
yeah, exactly. So, and like Scott said, Anderson Pilar has really good minor league numbers, but the Marlins left him unprotected in the Rule 5. Like, the Marlins could have put him on on their 40 man if they wanted to. They didn't really want to. So he might be good, but like, there's reason to doubt that. So that's my first point. My second point is this: Alex has always been hyper aggressive about the bullpen, and he's always spent money, quite honestly, to a level that I've always felt was more than I would like. He is always like, I remember when he gave Kenley Jansen like 17 million out of nowhere one year when the Braves already had a really good bullpen. He was like, all right, we're just going to add Kenley Jansen for 17 million. He famously gave that big Will Smith contract, like $42 million to Will Smith. Like Shawn just said, he traded for Melanson's contract, which was not small when Melanson was the closer for the Giants. He gave Joe Jimenez a big contract, gave Pierce Johnson a big contract. Like, he spends on the bullpen, which makes this even weirder that we're where we are in the offseason, and there's been no additions, even though there's been some pretty major subtractions in Minter and Jimenez. So like David Robertson would look great in this, but like, you add David Robertson to this pen tomorrow, it's a different, this is a whole different conversation. I've read a lot about Robert Suarez in San Diego, and apparently they're more motivated to move him. They are to move Cesar King. And so there are people in San Diego that think he's going to get moved before opening day. You add Robert Suarez to this bullpen, whole different outlook. There are moves still out there to be made where you can still go into the season with a unbelievably good bullpen, like Rocio Iglesias, Robert Suarez, Grant Holmes, Pierce Johnson, Dylan, Aaron Bummer. I'll take that bullpen all day.
Yeah.
But when it's Daysbel Hernandez, Angel Perdomo, Anderson Pilar, Danny Jimenez, when you have money to spend and you're trying to win a World Series, that does not inspire the level of confidence. Like Scott said, they don't have to have these holes. They have the resources to go fill these holes. So just go fill them. There's no reason to put yourself in this situation where you're depending on 4 guys who no one's ever heard of, who have never proven in the majors to be good. You don't have to do that. You have money to spend. They're still 20 plus million away from what they spent last year. And Alex said payroll was going up. That's not even including any, additional payroll they want to add. They have money to spend. They have a clear hole in the bullpen. I think the bullpen might even be a bigger hole than the rotation. You guys can weigh on that if you want to, but they need at least one more decent arm in the bullpen, in my opinion. I'd love it to be right-handed because Perdomo, Lee, and Bummer are all left-handed, but I would love one more high-leverage right-handed reliever, and I would feel so much better about this situation.
Yeah. And, just, I guess, again, to reemphasize, all of us are rooting for moves here because I think the theme of the pod is this is a really good roster as it stands today, but it can be even better and be even better with like clear areas to address. We're not asking them to move around 4 puzzle pieces in order to address one spot. It's pretty straightforward. Sign a reliever or trade for a reliever and try to add a starting pitcher. And I think adding even just one, even if they want to be weird and only maybe the Braves are so bullish on Grant Holmes, or maybe they're going to see AJ Smith-Shawver throw a bullpen tomorrow and they're going to have their socks blown off and go, holy crap, this is the rookie of the year in the National League, or whatever the circumstance is. But just one arm makes everything look so much better, just like adding Profar did to the outfield. It's amazing how just one player does it all. And the last point I wanted to make on this, which is a little weird to me, we know for pretty certain the Braves were very in on Jeff Hoffman in November, probably. He would have commanded at least a 3-4 year deal, maybe 8 million, 10 million, 12 million. We'll never know. But of course, if folks somehow missed it, the Braves failed Hoffman's physical, and he ultimately signed with Toronto after also failing a physical with Baltimore. And then they were also reportedly in on Tanner Scott. I don't know if we'll ever truly know what kind of money they were willing to throw at Scott. He ended up getting $18 million a year from LA and is long gone. But it does seem like they have been willing to spend money on the bullpen. And it's just a little weird to me that we sit here today and apparently they were so ready to go get Jeff Hoffman, but then nothing else for 4 months after that. I don't really know what to make of it. It's just kind of odd to me.
Yeah. I would say Alex is definitely individual player based, not necessarily positional need based. Like he's always been like, yeah, I need this, but if I don't love the deal, I have to love the player. He said that a bunch. Like he has to love the deal. He has to love the player. I do think they liked Hoffman a lot just because he could start potentially. Tanner Scott is unreal. I would have, God, I wanted Tanner Scott so bad.
Yeah, me too.
The Dodgers are just the Dodgers are assholes, but I would love to know how hard he's gone after I would love to know how hard he's gone after David Robertson. And we might, we'll see where he goes. I get he's 40. He's a different type of pitcher than Tanner Scott or Jeff Hoffman is, but he's a very good reliever. I thought they might be on Kenley. Kenley got a lot more money than I thought he would get. The Angels gave him like $15 million. So yeah, we'll see. But I do think it's very individual player based with Alex. But I would just be stunned. I've tweeted this the other day. I'd be stunned if this is the group of pitchers they take into opening day, if they don't add somebody significant between now and when that first series in San Diego starts, 6-7 weeks from now. So we'll see. But it's a good team. It is a really good team. It's a very good team. No one is saying that. There's no one saying this is a bad team, but it's got holes in it, and it doesn't really have to have those holes. There's money, and there are players that can make this better. So, let's just go do that, and then we can talk about, I would love for our next podcast to be, how does David Robertson fit into this bullpen? How does Robert Suarez fit into this bullpen? That would be, that's where I'm rooting for at this point.
One other, I guess, creative approach to the idea of the bullpen is that, we named off some names: Ian Anderson, AJ Smith-Shawver, Hurston Waldrop, for instance, that could make sense. But Alex Anthopoulos, in one of his recent media gatherings, he did throw out a bit of an interesting nugget in that, Ian Anderson, it could be looked at for the bullpen himself. And so when we talk about, fifth starter options, one of the things that stands out to me is, well, what if they get creative and they potentially see, okay, we're not necessarily admitting that, a starting spot for him is not in the future, but what if they think that Hurston Waldrop, with his filthy splitter that he has, could he be someone that could make sense in the bullpen? Could we get AJ Smith enough innings, Smith-Shawver enough innings to be in the bullpen himself? Grant Holmes obviously going, Ian Anderson as well. I wonder if the Braves may get creative with one of their highly thought of arms. If they're satisfied with the starting rotation, could they shift that promising arm to the bullpen for a time? And at the very least, the quality of depth that you have in the pen increases internally. And that also goes to the point that me and Stephen had talked about before, where we just don't have a lot of internal bullpen options. I wonder if they may get creative in that sense.
Yeah.
They might have to. If Alex really doesn't like the free agent market, maybe someone comes in and gives David Robertson a crazy deal, or maybe Robert Suarez fetches a top 100 prospect for San Diego, or I think Steven said it perfectly. Alex is never going to have his feet tied to the fire and make a hasty move, whether for good or bad. I mean, I think Andrew Friedman, now the GM of the Dodgers, has a great quote when he was with Tampa Bay that was, if you're rational about every free agent, you're going to finish third on every free agent. And you can't necessarily operate your entire team on that, but sometimes, you have to give in, give the extra $2 million, give a mutual option, which is basically a team option anyway. Do what you have to do. Make it a bigger signing bonus so the guy can pay less taxes over the year. I don't know. Whatever you have to do it to make this really good World Series contender even more so of a World Series contender.
And I'll say this about Ian Anderson, another guy with no options, by the way. And as we get into spring training, this is going to be a lot more important. But there's a ton. Brad and I did a show like a month ago about how crazy the crazy number of players the Braves have in camp that have no options, and it's actually a crazy number. We'll as camp starts and we start getting into these names, we'll talk about that more. But Ian Anderson and Grant Holmes are two prominent ones that don't have any options left, and so like he needs to be willing to go to the bullpen because that might be the only way he has a job, at least with the Braves organization. I could see that. He's always been a 2-pitch guy. The third pitch thing has always been a problem for him. Fastball changeup has always been kind of his main thing. Maybe out of the bullpen it would work better. Maybe he could throw a little harder. I don't know. That would be interesting. I could see it. I could definitely see it. I don't know. With AJ Smith-Shawver or Herschel Waldrop, I don't know if you're willing to sacrifice the development. When you have top arms, and I don't know if they consider those two guys top arms anymore. They did have rough years last year, but when you have high level prospects, I'm not sure you want to move them to the bullpen this early, at least. I don't know how they feel about that, if it's going to stunt their growth as starters, but if the big league club needs relievers, then sometimes that's what you do. So yeah, that's a good point, Sean. They could get creative on some of these younger guys. Potentially, Waldrop in the bullpen actually does have some interesting characteristics to it. That might be a deeper show at some point, but yeah, I could definitely see that happen.
And guys, the final note that I'll say is this: we haven't even touched on our one ace in the hole. If we just have to put all our cards out on the table, I think we're all looking forward to the mid-May podcast where we're talking about David Fletcher's knuckleball debut in Atlanta to be there as depth for either the starting rotation or the bullpen. We may be a couple of injuries away from that.
I thought you were going to talk about Jesse Chavez's inevitable return.
There we go. That's also there. So we have options. Are they reliable? Are they sensible? Are they good? No, but there are options that are out there. Scott, Stephen, anything else as we wrap up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast on the eve of spring training officially starting? I know we have a ton of questions, but that's the point of this time of year. Lay out the questions. Spring training will give us the answers. And hey, if you don't find the answers that you like, go out and see what else is out there to get them answered.
Yeah, let's hope it's a healthy next 6 weeks for the Braves, especially as warm-ups or practices and drills and all that. Bullpens, simulated games, real games. Everybody just cross your fingers and hope that the Braves don't pick up any injuries. It's frankly the worst part of spring training is just making sure everybody is healthy. But fingers crossed the Braves are healthy and also have a move or two or three left in them. I think it's pretty clear after talking with y'all for 40 minutes now that very good team, but could use a little more fuel on the fire. And hopefully Alex is able to make a couple of deals happen.
Yeah. And I'll say this, obviously spring training kicks off tomorrow. I think the 60-day IL opens tomorrow. With pitchers and catchers reporting, I wouldn't be surprised if we see like we saw Kenley sign today. I think pitchers are wary of coming into camp too late. I wouldn't be surprised if we got some movement around the league tomorrow with guys signing, especially with 40-man spots being able to be open with a 60-day IL. So again, it would not surprise me at all, especially since we're doing a podcast tonight. At some point tomorrow, the Braves make a move. But yeah, I want to see it. There's no reason to have, again, you can go look at Bowman's list. There's no reason to have that group of names be your likely starting 8 out of your bullpen when you're trying to win a World Series, when you have money to spend and you've got guys on the free agent market that could help you. So yeah, it's a good team. Scott's right. This is the time of year where you hold your breath as pitchers really start ramping up to start the season. This is where injuries usually pop up if there's going to be some as guys get going and ramping up. So this is where we kind of start holding our breath for Chris Sale, Ronaldo Lopez, Spencer Strider obviously is the big one. This is where injuries could pop up, but if everybody stays healthy, it is a good team. It's a really good team. I can't wait. I'm so damn excited for this season. But yeah, just a couple more arms and I'd feel so much better about it.
Absolutely. And of course, another thing that we need to touch on, as we wrap up this edition of Hammer Territory is that, the Braves alluded to it earlier today, alluding to the fact that this year, both in spring training and the regular season, the fan base Braves country is going to be able to access games easier and more frequently than they ever have before. So many details already out there, so many details to come. So we're going to be able to give you all the best content that we can, since we're going to be able to see as many games as we possibly can as well. So make sure you stick with Hammer Territory, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. Yes, you're welcome. Yes. Wow. Yes. I mean, just, hey, that was my vibes towards the Braves off season. That move right there, you had to wait 45 minutes for the entire show for it to be pulled off. That's what we're waiting for on March 27th when the Braves finally make the move to address their pitching staff. Scott, Stephen, anything else as we wrap up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast?
Bama won by 25, by the way.
So that's going to be edited out, but neither one of y'all could top that beautiful hat spin. For Scott Coleman at Scott Coleman 55, Stephen Tolbert at _outliers. My name's Shawn Coleman at StatsSAC. Hammertory wherever you enjoy your podcast, also across all forms of social media, and again, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. For Scott and Stephen, my name's Shawn Coleman. We will talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.